clearly there was so much to investigate, so much to do, that some cases have slipped through the net.
Failed by the system and the people he trusted most to take care of him. The death of a little boy who dreamed of being a footballer will now be the subject of local and national investigations.
Welcome back. I'm Cassie, and this is A Wicked World. If you haven't checked out A Wicked World on Patreon yet, and you want to help support the channel even more, then click the link in the description box below, and there you'll have access to over 40 exclusive videos, with new ones being added each month. The story I have for you today is about a little boy who was being treated much differently than the other children in the home. And after his death, hundreds of audio and video recordings of his cruel treatment were uncovered, showing just how sick and twisted the people who had done this to him really were. This is the story of Arthur Labinjo-Hughes. Arthur Labinjo-Hughes was born on January 4th, 2014, to his mother, Olivia Labinjo-Hughes, and his father, Thomas Hughes. He loved going to school and wanted to be a superhero, with his favorite superhero being Batman. Arthur also loved sausage rolls, playing cricket, and he wanted to be a football player when he grew up. He additionally adored spending time with his extended family. Arthur's mother and father separated around the time that he turned 2, and they would continue to share custody. However, Arthur primarily lived with his mother, Olivia. Then, in February of 2019, Olivia stabbed her live-in partner, Gary Cunningham, to death after a long period of mutual domestic violence. This led to Arthur's father, Thomas, becoming his sole caregiver, and Arthur moved in with him in his annex behind Thomas's parents' home. Arthur also had to change schools at this point, and he began attending Dickens Heath Community Primary School. According to Arthur's grandmother, he was very nervous about all these big changes in his life, but he quickly became a happy, well-rounded child. In August of 2019, the little boy's father would meet a woman named Emma Tustin on the dating website Plenty of Fish. Emma would be introduced to Arthur pretty early on in the relationship, and according to her and Arthur became friends right away. But Emma also had a history of domestic violence, both as the victim and as the perpetrator. She also had 4 children of her own, 2 of which continued to live with her. Initially, after Arthur's mother was arrested, he still had telephone contact with her 3 times a week, but this all came to an end in October of 2019. His father, Thomas, had stopped the communication not only between Arthur and his mother, but also between Arthur and his maternal grandmother and everyone else on that side of his family. Then, in December of 2019, Arthur's mother, Olivia, initiated the process to establish contact with her son again. The Child and Family Court Advisory Support System then became involved in his life. When Arthur returned to school following the summer holiday, his teacher would say that she had no concerns about the boy. But as autumn grew closer, she noticed that Arthur seemed to be less happy. His uncle also noted that Thomas had become a lot stricter with the boy, and Arthur was often very fearful of getting in trouble. Soon after, an official at Arthur's school organized a meeting with Arthur's father, Thomas, as well as his grandmother, over her concerns that the boy was developing an obsession with things like guns, killing, and violence. Arthur had become very anxious and was fearful that his father would leave him or kill him. Then there was the incident that occurred during the school's nativity play, when a baby had been removed from its crib and Arthur became very upset. In early 2020, Thomas would take his son to multiple medical appointments, but Arthur was never diagnosed with any mental health problems. Meanwhile, the pandemic led to the closure of all schools in the UK and a national lockdown by the end of March of 2020. It was at the beginning of this lockdown that Arthur and his father began to stay with Thomas's new girlfriend, Emma. After a few weeks, Thomas's mother asked that he and Arthur move back into the annex behind her house, but Thomas refused and instead decided that they would move in with Emma. But only a couple weeks into their new living arrangement, at Emma's Solihull home on April 14th, Arthur and his father stayed overnight at his grandparents' home once again, following a disagreement between Thomas and Emma. Just 2 days later, the couple would reconcile, and Thomas and Arthur returned to living with Emma. This was despite his grandparents' concerns that Arthur was not being treated correctly in the home. And they even tried to convince Thomas to leave Arthur with them so they could care for him, but he refused. The same day that Arthur went back to living with Emma and his father Thomas, his grandmother Joanne Hughes contacted Child Services. In regards to bruising that she had noticed on Arthur's back, as well as scratches on his face, the grandmother questioned the explanation that had been given to her by Thomas, which was that the bruising had been a result of a play fight between Arthur and one of Emma's sons. When the agency went out to Emma's home, they observed a scratch on Arthur's face and a faded bruise on his back. The social worker would ask both Arthur and one of Emma's sons how happy and safe they felt in the home on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being represented as the floor and the ceiling as the opposite. Both boys very confidently jumped up and pointed to the ceiling, indicating that they felt safe and happy there. Therefore, the social worker saw no safeguarding concerns, and the case was closed out shortly after. During this visit, Arthur's father Thomas was also offered an early help program to assist his son in dealing with his traumatic past, but he declined. It would later be discovered that Thomas and Emma had coached Arthur and the other child into lying to social services about the fight between the two and warned that if they didn't, they would be taken out of the home. Arthur's uncle, Daniel Hughes, reached out to police in regards to the concerning bruises on Arthur's back, even sending them photos, but would never hear anything from them again. Arthur's grandmother also reached out to his school at this point and informed them about the referral that had been made to social services. This led to a school official contacting the agency, but they were told that they had no concerns about Arthur's well-being. Additionally, Emma Tustin's stepfather contacted social services and made an anonymous referral because he was in fear for Arthur's safety. But still, nothing was done. Then, in May of 2020, things only worsened for Arthur. He was made to stand in the hallway for hours on end, sometimes for as many as 14 hours. And Emma would often send video and audio clips to Thomas of Arthur crying during these punishments. Eventually, the couple even installed cameras in the home so that they could watch Arthur while he was being punished, and they didn't need to be there to actually deal with it. Emma actually had more than 200 audio recordings of Arthur in distress saved to her phone, including 2 particularly horrific clips in which the boy can be heard crying that nobody loves him and crying for food. And his father Thomas, who was receiving these clips from Emma during the day while he was at work, encouraged the behavior, even one time telling Emma to just end him. The couple would also repeatedly insult the child, calling him things like weasel, Hitler, devil child, and Satan. As you can see in the video footage that was taken, Arthur was being forced to sleep on the living room floor, instead of in the bedroom with Emma's other children. On top of that, he was not allowed to eat with the rest of the family, but they made sure to eat in front of him. At one point, Emma would even say to Thomas, "I want you, but not him," referring to Arthur. When schools reopened in June of 2020, Arthur did not attend, and his father would make up excuses for the child's absences. The first day, he told school officials that the boy hadn't slept well, so he wouldn't be coming in. Then, over the next few days, Thomas reported that his son was losing weight because of not eating well, and he might faint. Arthur would never end up going back to school again before his death. Over a 3-day period from June 12th to the 14th, Arthur was isolated for 25 hours in a hallway while Emma's children could be seen enjoying food and activities. On June 15th, Emma made a hairdresser's appointment and brought Arthur with her. But once they got there, she made Arthur face the door and not move the entire time. The hairdresser would later describe the boy as looking very thin and frail. His legs were shaking, and he didn't seem like he could hold himself up very long. The next day, on June 16th, CCTV footage that was taken from the home's living room showed Arthur, who'd slept on the floor, looking very weak as he struggled to carry his blankets out of the room. The family would again return to the hairdressers. This time, Thomas would go as well, and he and Emma took turns shouting at Arthur while they were there, almost like it was a game of tennis. The hairdresser would sneak Arthur a glass of water when Emma and Thomas weren't looking, and she said that the little boy looked absolutely petrified. Once they returned back home that day, Arthur's father, Thomas, would go out to run some errands, leaving the boy home with Emma. Around 2:30 p.m., Emma sent Thomas a text telling him that his son was lying on the floor and wouldn't get up after he had hit his head several times. Along with this message, she sent a photo of Arthur, who was unconscious and barely breathing. CCTV footage also showed Emma at this time picking up Arthur and trying to prop him up on the sofa. Thomas returned back home shortly after, and he tried to give his son some medication. When this clearly had zero effect because the boy had hit his head, they finally decided that it was time to call emergency services at 2:42 p.m.
Ambulance service. Is the patient breathing?
Barely.
Okay, is he breathing right now, though, even if he's...
Is he breathing, Tom? He keeps taking big dark breaths. Basically, my 6-year-old stepson is falling, he's banged his head.
Okay.
And while he was on the floor, he's banged his head another 5 times.
Okay.
He's lost colour, he's got a big lump on his head.
Is he awake?
So what, sorry?
Is he awake?
He's half in and out,
Okay.
but he's banged his head quite hard.
Is his breathing noisy or abnormal?
Is it noisy or abnormal? It's barely there, he's barely breathing, he's in and out, he's taking it hard.
Okay.
He's basically been treating us all like shit. He's threw himself on the floor, he's headbutting the floor. I'm trying to pick him up in the process, he's headbutting me in the process.
Okay.
I've got him up, he was breathing like a little bit better at first.
Yeah.
Washed him down, put some water down him, tried to obviously get him like, a bit more colour in him, but then obviously I've seen the lump on his head that he's done to himself.
Right. Help's been arranged for him. Okay.
Yeah.
Try and keep calm for me. Can you get him laid out flat on his back?
Flat on his back.
How old is he?
He's 6, nearly 7.
Paramedics would arrive at Emma's home shortly after, and when they did, they found a neighbor performing CPR on Arthur. The 6-year-old had bruises all over his body, looked underweight, and his gums were bleeding. Emma was there too, crying and claiming that Arthur had done this to himself after headbutting the floor. But first responders and police were both very suspicious of what Emma had told them happened.
Just briefly, what happened?
Basically, he'd gone out to get me a birthday cake and stuff for the kids. Arthur was told to sit on the thinking step. Arthur's put himself all over the floor. He's banged himself off the radiator. He's hit me, he's kicked me in the process of me trying to get him back on the thinking step. He's then gone on all fours on the floor, and I've told him to get up. And I shut the door over, and all I heard was a crack off the floor. He was headbutting the floor on all fours. Headbutted the floor once, said, "Arthur, get up, you're going to hurt yourself. I've phoned your dad." He went, "I don't care." At that point, he was fine. And then he dropped his head again as I've tried to bear hug him and pick him up, and he headbutted the floor 3 times.
Here on this carpet?
Round about, the door was shut, so if you go in, I'll show you. Because it's probably about here his head was, but it's concrete, there's no underlay under that. But he'd banged his head 3 or 4 times. Obviously then went to pick him up. He'd knocked himself unconscious. I picked him up, put him on the sofa, poured water in his mouth.
So you've come in, he's banged his head 3 or 4 times
I was
here.
in the kitchen, then I'd sat down in the living room, and that's when he threw himself on the floor.
And you heard him banging his head?
Bang his head.
So what did you do?
I came out to him and told him to get up. He told me no. So I tried to bear hug him and put my arms underneath him and pick him up. And he dropped, and he banged his head another 3 times off the floor. And as I picked him up, he hit me and he kicked me as I was trying to get him up.
And then what? And you went?
I picked him up off the floor.
Yeah.
Tried to put him on the stairs just to get him to, but his head's obviously going out, so I put him straight on the stairs. I said, "Where you've got to phone an ambulance."
So he's unresponsive?
Yeah. Like I say, he's like, the last 6 months, he's battered both my kids. He's smashed this house to pieces. He's battered his dad. He's hit me. When I tried to get him off the floor from headbutting the floor, he headbutted me and he kicked me and he's hit me. Yesterday we went to my friend's house and he pushed me down 5 stairs. "You're not my real mum, I hate ya. I'm gonna get my mum to kill you," he said. And even so, I've done my best for that kid. Me. I tried to get him off the floor.
It's incredibly sickening to hear Emma talk about how she was treated poorly by Arthur, a 6-year-old. A 6-year-old who was now fighting for his life because of her. The little boy was then rushed to the Birmingham Children's Hospital, where doctors concluded that nothing could be done to save his life. And Arthur's life support was unplugged the very next morning at 1 a.m. When he'd been admitted to the hospital, Arthur had over 130 bruises on his body. He also had a head injury and had been poisoned with salt. It was determined that his severe head trauma had been what killed him, and was likely caused by the little boy being vigorously shaken and his head banged repeatedly against a hard surface. Due to the nature of Arthur's injuries and the highly suspicious story given by Emma and Thomas, they were both arrested on the evening of June 16th, initially on suspicion of assault, but they would both later be charged with murder. They were additionally facing 4 counts of child cruelty. According to one of the fathers of Emma's children, she had only ever wanted to have children in the first place for the attention that they brought her as newborns and for the child benefits. Money meant for her kids would be spent on tattoos and clothing for herself. This man said that Emma knew how to work the system and would turn on the waterworks, lie, and say that her partner was hurting her if a social worker showed up. One time, he even claimed that Emma had thrown herself out of a window, breaking her leg to stop him from going out for drinks with a friend in order to celebrate the birth of their new baby. Another one of Emma's ex-boyfriends would say that she had jumped from a parking garage when he tried to end things with her. This had resulted in her 2 younger children going to live with their father. On top of all of that, Emma was also pregnant with Thomas's baby when she was arrested, but she would end the pregnancy while she was in custody at 21 weeks. When Thomas and Emma ended up going to trial, a medical expert would testify that there was no way that Arthur's injuries could have been self-inflicted. A specialist kidney consultant would say that in order for Arthur's body to have such high levels of salt, he had either ingested 6.5 tablespoons of salt on the day that he had died, though the expert could not see how a child could have possibly done this on his own, or Arthur had been repeatedly poisoned by heavily contaminated food or water. In the end, Emma Tustin was found guilty of murdering Arthur Labinjo-Hughes, and his father Thomas was found guilty of manslaughter. Emma was jailed for life with a minimum of 29 years. His father was also given life with a minimum of 21 years. Not long after that, however, the Court of Appeals would increase Thomas's sentence to a minimum of 24 years, finding his prior sentence too lenient. They refused to change Emma's sentence, however, finding that hers reflected her actions. Madeline Halcrow, Arthur's maternal grandmother, reported that Emma was obsessed with the idea that Thomas would go back to Arthur's biological mother, Olivia, once she got released from prison, and that the only way to get Olivia out of her life was to get Arthur out of her life.
Was the happiest child. He was very, very much loved by everyone, and he was my sunny delight. He had a wicked sense of humour. He really did. He was just adorable. Arthur was very intuitive, and he must have had this sense of impending doom that something was going to happen to him. The most disturbing thing to me, I said, there's new bruises on top of old, which tells me this has been going on. And, you know, there's yellow bruises, there was purple bruises, all over. Seen them, I just imagined the pain Arthur would have been in.
Shortly after Emma and Thomas's convictions, the government announced that there would be a national inquiry into Arthur's case. This review would end up finding that Child Protective Services had been involved in Arthur's life on various occasions dating back to 2018, but had failed the little boy repeatedly by not intervening to help. Arthur's death made a significant impact on the local community and particularly football fans. His favorite team, Birmingham City FC, named a family area at the St. Andrews Stadium after him, and supporters sang his name in a march through Birmingham prior to the match. He was also honored at various football matches on December 4th, 2021. Beginning in 2020, an annual preseason game named the Arthur Cup was announced, with a portion of proceeds from the match going to the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. A 6-tree tribute was also planted near the house on Cranmore Road where Arthur had lived. A public vigil would be held outside the house following his death. A Solihull police officer's poem about Arthur the superhero was used on a family memorial plaque for the 6-year-old, which was also placed near the home where he had lived. The officer who wrote the poem, Jess Davies, had a son who was just 5 months older than Arthur. She said that the incident left a real impact on her, and so she penned the poem for the little boy. The poem read, "Arthur, close your eyes and you'll feel him near. The most magical story you'll ever hear. A superhero with the biggest smile. He came into this world for a little while. How he loves his squashies and football too, singing Keep Right On to his boys in blue. The happiest soul with eyes so bright, the cheekiest smile a sunny delight. Superheroes are real, you see. They are here to look after you and me. They touch our hearts and light up the sky, but then we must all say goodbye. This superhero could only stay a while. Heaven needed his superhero smile. We mustn't be sad, for he has work to do. Little Arthur's shining love on all of you." Well, thank you for listening to Arthur's story today. It blows my mind when someone who's already a mother themselves starts hurting another child, especially one that she's supposed to love and care for. It makes me wonder if Emma's own children suffered any cruel punishments at her hands prior to Arthur's arrival. And even though Emma was the one who killed Arthur in the end, I'm glad that his father Thomas got a punishment that was almost equal to hers, since he had been extremely compliant in the little boy's mistreatment and had even told her one time to end him. So, if you like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least 3 times every single week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care guys. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims never get forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a case you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email at awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.